Hello everyone, my name is Moronto Miyakibugu and I'm a cybersecurity research executive for the ThinkCyber Nigeria Kaizen program. As cyber threats continue to evolve, many organizations and institutions find it difficult to keep up with real-world threat management, and that's why the Kaizen program exists to bridge the gap between theory and practice through continuous hands-on learning. In this episode, I'll be walking you through Corrosion 1 and Corrosion 2, which are two of the challenge machines in our Kaizen series. We will break down key phases of pen testing, including enumeration, gaining a foothold, privilege escalation, and real-world vulnerability prevention tips. All of this is made possible through ThinkCyber Nigeria's structured simulator-based training, which helps learners to build practical skills with tools and techniques used in the industry. Now, let's dive in.
So I'll be walking you through the Corrosion 1 CTF, which is a vulnerable machine hosted on the OneHub platform. I'm going to be doing this following a structured methodology which goes from the discovery to enumeration to foothold and finally the privilege escalation where we gain access as root. We began with the discovery phase where we used Nmap to perform a robust scan enabling the -S, which is the service detection flag. The service detection flag allows you to see the exact services running behind each of these open ports. Nmap helped us identify that we had the port 22, which is the SSH port open, and also the port 80, which is the HTTP port open, and these are the services running behind them. We can then move on to the enumeration phase whereby we enumerate each of the services we found open. Now, I used a directory brute force tool called GoBuster on the port 80 to help uncover any hidden subdomains, and I was able to find the task subdomain and the blog post. So this is the output of the GoBuster tool. Hereby, this is the command, and the output showed us that it has the blog posts and the task open. These are screenshots of it. This is the task subdomain, and this is the blog post subdomain. I then went ahead to perform further enumeration by performing another directory brute force on the blog posts, whereby I was able to discover the archives and the uploads page. This is the command used. And with this, we're able to see that they had the archives and the uploads accessible to us, the target IP address and the 22. You get a banner, and this banner is basically showing you the service version of the SSH port that is open. You then input the PHP reverse shell, so this allows for a reverse shell to be called back to your IP address and on this particular port. Now that I've done this attempt will have been logged onto the SSH because it is a failed attempt. It says here invalid SSH identification string, so it will be logged on the all.log as a failed attempt. Upon login, you can then go to your Metasploit framework. Metasploit framework allows you to automate penetration testing processes from setting up listeners to foothold to privilege escalation. So I used this to set up a listener and ensured the payload was a bash payload because this allows for you to catch a bash shell. I set the local host to my IP and the local port to the same port I put here. Once this was done, I ran it, went back to the page here and reloaded the browser. Upon reload, I was able to catch a shell successfully, but I caught the shell as a limited user, which was www data. This is proof of me catching the shell. It shows that I'm a limited user. That's the www data, which you can see there. We can proceed to the final stage, which is the privilege escalation. So for this, I also used Metasploit as it allowed me automate the escalation process using its post module called local exploit suggester. These are the local exploit suggester works. It basically suggests proven escalation paths that can be leveraged to gain root access. It doesn't run them, it only gives you suggestions. It only gives you suggestions that you can use. So with this, I went ahead to use this command whereby I use the post multi-recon local exploit suggester. I set the session ID to the session ID of the meterpreter, which is also being shown here. That's the set session 2. And here you can see it gave us multiple exploits which can be used, with the most promising being the first one, which is the PK exec. PK exec is a vulnerability to the toolkit. Basically, it allows for you to run commands as other users, such as sudo, just that sudo takes its rules from the sudo group, while by PK exec takes its rules from the toolkit. So using this vulnerability, you can leverage it, can be leveraged to get root access by the Metasploit framework. Went ahead to load up the exploits using the use exploit Linux local and the exploit here. You go ahead to set the session ID to the same interpreter session ID, which is session 2, which can be seen here. Set to session 2. You go ahead and run it. Once you run it, you gain root access, which can be shown here. You can see the server username is being shown as root. Now that you've gained root access, you can go ahead and perform as multiple actions as you want, due to the fact that root is the highest form of privilege available on a Linux machine. Here is a brief summary of the walkthrough, which I did in a tree like structure, following the same methodology as I discussed earlier. It goes from discovery to enumeration to foothold and finally the privilege escalations.
Now let's break down how the vulnerabilities are exploited on this machine align with OWASP Top 10, which is a list of the most critical security risks for web applications. First was broken access control. This refers to situations where users can access things they shouldn't be able to access. And on this machine, I exploited local file inclusion to read sensitive system files like /etc/password and auth.log. This file should never be accessible from a web interface, but there were no restrictions put in place. Also, there was security misconfiguration. This is about systems using insecure default settings or being left exposed. For example, the default Apache page was still visible, and the EasySysInfo binary, which could be run with sudo, was writable by a non-root user. Both are serious misconfigurations that made the attack easier. Another one is identification and authentication failures. The system stored credentials in plain text inside a file called my_password.txt, which was found in a backup zip. That's poor password hygiene, and it's a major risk if backups are exposed. Also, login and monitoring failures. I was able to read the entire auth.log file without any alert or restriction, and this kind of exposure means an attacker can learn a lot about system behavior without being noticed and even inject malicious commands, as I did.
Here's the weekly activity report for the Corrosion 1 and Corrosion 2 machine, which are vulnerable machines on the OneUp platform. Discovery phase. Tools involved include the Nmap and Not Discover, the approach to the technique, the uniqueness of the technique. And we have the enumeration phase, where we listed the tools and services, also the techniques, the foothold, where we explain the exploits used, the technique also, and finally the privilege escalation phase. Then we move on to the general notes or reflections. Thank you.
By the way, if you're looking to level up your cybersecurity career, ThinkCyber Nigeria's got you covered. The next cyber simulator training kicks off on August 25th of 2025.